Looking back at like the most chaotic, aggressively rebellious phase of your youth.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Right. That specific era where you actively tried to just provoke everyone around you.
I think we all have a version of that. Yeah.
Exactly. But imagine realizing that all of that loud rebellion, it doesn't embarrass you even a little bit today.
That's just pretty rare, honestly.
Right. But then a memory of just a quiet dinner, sitting under dim lighting across from someone who genuinely admire your work, that is the memory that absolutely haunts you with shame.
It completely flips our standard script for nostalgia, doesn't it?
It totally does.
Because we usually assume our loud public failures or those cringeworthy phases will be the things that keep us up at night.
Yeah, the stuff you did in high school.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
While our quiet romantic moments, those will be the cherished treasures we hold on to forever.
But that inversion is basically the compass for today's deep dive.
It's a fascinating one.
Yeah, we are exploring a really remarkable piece of writing by the Egyptian author Bahaa Awaad. It's a blog post titled Things That Press on the Soul.
Such a great title.
It really is. And
Yeah.
instead of charting his life chronologically, like, I was born here, then this happened, Awad does something far more resonant.
Yeah, he organizes his past by the emotional weight it carries today.
Exactly. He sorts his memories into what doesn't embarrass him, what deeply does, what has completely evaporated into nothingness, and what still actively hurts right now.
It's a ruthless framework when you really look at it.
It is.
I mean, it forces this separation between the historical reality of an event and its actual survival rate in the human psyche.
Right, like what actually makes it through to the present day.
Exactly. We are looking at the shifting landscape of memory, specifically through the lens of Egypt's 90s generation, and kind of tracking how time acts as an editorial force on our identities.
So the journey begins with that loud performative rebellion we were talking about.
Yeah, the unabashed youth phase.
Right. Awad describes his cohort in the 90s as a generation characterized by like an excess of romance and a profound generosity in their madness.
I love that phrasing. Generosity in their madness.
Me too. They were entirely prone to dissolution and rebellion. And for Awad, the weapon of choice was satirical poetry.
Okay, so weaponizing words.
Yeah, he wrote verses designed to mock, and he just relished the fact that Egyptian society absolutely despised his poems.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he even included these hated pieces in his published collections specifically because society's rejection was like his primary source of joy.
See, the dynamic there is so crucial to understand. The provocation wasn't a means to an end for them.
Right.
The provocation was the entire point. And Awad introduces this brilliant thought experiment here, asking us to imagine what would have happened if social media had existed then.
Oh man, imagine.
Right, like if Twitter, Facebook, Instagram had been around during that peak anti-establishment phase.
He theorizes they would have had millions of followers.
Easy.
Because, in his own words, they expertly manipulated society's virtues and danced on the corpses of heritages.
That is an incredibly striking image of youthful arrogance.
It really is. It's essentially the blueprint for having a fully formed, hyperviral TikTok personality. But, a decade and a half before the smartphone was even invented.
Yes, exactly.
They possessed this chaotic, disruptive energy and knew exactly how to press the culture's buttons, but they were performing without a global megaphone.
And by the time that electronic megaphone finally arrived, the internal fire had just burned itself out.
Yeah.
The meanings of rebellion had died down inside them. Awad notes the deep irony that when the internet finally gave them the platform, they seemingly would have dominated.
They were already exhausted.
Exactly. They found themselves actually craving the very myths and miracles of the past that they used to tear down.
It's so wild to think about, like a younger version of yourself trying desperately to be edgy, actively trying to offend people, and completely missing the technological wave that would have made you famous.
It sounds like a recipe for regret.
Right. That seems like prime material for retroactive embarrassment. I mean, the desire to be seen as controversial usually ages terribly.
It usually does, yeah, because that desire is so often rooted in a desperation for an audience. But Awad's realization is that for his generation, missing out on social media fame was actually a profound blessing.
Wait, really? A blessing?
Yeah, because having millions of followers wouldn't have resonated with them anyway. The world itself was already entirely meaningless to them.
Oh, I see.
Their rebellion wasn't a performance for metrics. It was a survival mechanism against the mundane. He describes that specific era as paradoxically beautiful, wonderful, ordinary, and just completely free of boredom.
So the purity of the rebellion is what saves it from being embarrassing today.
Precisely.
They didn't need validation from a screen because just the friction of pushing against society's boundaries was enough to keep them alive.
Right.
It's a strangely peaceful way to reconcile with a messy, loud youth.
It is. Which then sets up a pretty brutal contrast for the next section.
Yeah, it does.
Because if the loud public rebellion against the entire societal heritage doesn't cause a wince of embarrassment today, we have to look at what actually does.
Right. The transition here is sharp. We're moving from the macro scale of societal defiance to the intensely micro scale of personal vulnerability.
We find ourselves in the usual corner of a Chinese restaurant.
Right. Awaad paints the scene with this dim, magical lighting. He's sitting across from a girl, and he is just captivated.
Setting the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything about her in that light feels astonishing and charming. And the peak of this memory, the thing that filled him with so much joy at the time, was discovering she had actually memorized lines from his poems.
Oh, that's huge for a writer.
Huge. He channeled all his comedic energy just to hear her laugh, to hold her attention completely.
It's the absolute zenith of youthful romance, you know.
Totally.
He feels seen, intellectually validated, and emotionally anchored. But then Awaad shifts the narrative within that exact same setting.
Yeah.
The lighting is the same, the restaurant is the same, but the context has violently shifted to the night of their farewell.
Right. He's preparing to travel. He describes it as traveling north to the cold.
Which is such an evocative phrase.
It is. Going to corners of restaurants that have lighting without any of the magic. And he identifies this specific bittersweet goodbye as a source of intense embarrassment.
Which feels counterintuitive.
Yeah, my instinct here is to push back on that categorization. I mean, a cinematic farewell in a dimly lit restaurant before a young poet goes off into the cold. That sounds deeply romantic.
Right, like something out of a movie.
Exactly. It carries a heavy, melancholic aesthetic, but it hardly seems like something to be ashamed of decades later.
But the embarrassment isn't located in the romance or the sorrow.
Okay.
It is located entirely in the optics of the power dynamic.
Mm.
Awaad specifies that what embarrasses him is remembering the look in his own eyes, and more specifically, seeing that exact look reflected back at him in her eyes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was the moment he recognized the birth of Alaj.
Alas.
Right. It's the Arabic term, carrying the weight of utter helplessness, inability, or powerlessness. He saw it taking root in his soul.
That reframes the entire memory. It's this intense psychological whiplash.
Exactly.
Because just moments before, in the timeline of his life, he was the master of his reality. He was dancing on the corpses of heritages, manipulating societal virtues, and commanding the laughter of the person he admired.
He operated under the illusion of absolute invincibility.
Yes. And in the span of a single look across a table, the illusion just shattered.
Completely. All that societal rebellion meant absolutely nothing because he couldn't even control his own immediate reality.
Right.
He couldn't stop the departure. He couldn't freeze time. Witnessing your own fundamental weakness and seeing the person you want to impress, recognize that weakness.
Ooh,
Yeah, it creates a humiliation so deep it outlasts the heartbreak itself.
I mean, discovering your own powerlessness is a terrifying threshold to cross. And human nature dictates that when you suddenly discover you have zero control over your universe, the instinct isn't to just sit quietly with that realization.
Not at all.
You try to outrun it, right?
Yeah.
You manufacture chaos to drown out the quiet, creeping sense of inability.
And that evasion tactic is exactly what Awaad describes next. The flight from helplessness leads directly into endless, rambling nights.
Yeah.
He and his friends sought refuge in perpetual motion.
Right, the scene shifts to the Makatem Hills at 6 in the morning in early autumn. They're functioning on no sleep after a long night of drinking.
Classic escapism.
Completely.
Yeah.
Awaad outlines this endless pursuit of beer, how the supply would inevitably run out, forcing them into the unforgiving morning light to hunt for more. Their geography was just this loop of escapes, right? The Makatem Hills, the Nile, the pyramids, and the soundtrack to these nights consisted of meaningless stories about the innocence they were actively shedding, and above all else, an obsession with girls.
And he is incredibly pointed about that obsession.
Yeah, he really is.
Girls occupied the absolute center of every topic, every signal, and every joke.
Yeah.
The reflective question Awaad poses here is vital to understanding his current state of mind.
Right.
He asks, why did we let girls attack the areas of awareness in our being and occupy the castles and fortresses?
That wording is so intense. Framing the intellect and awareness as castles and fortresses, it implies a defensive structure that was willingly surrendered.
Exactly.
It's like finding a Polaroid picture of those Makatam Hill sunrises that has been left on a car dashboard in the blazing sun for a month.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, you can hold the physical object, you know intellectually it's a record of you and your friends living on the edge, but the image is completely blown out.
Yeah.
The colors have evaporated, the details are gone, and you can't feel the heat or the adrenaline of the moment anymore. It's just a blank square.
The Polaroid analogy perfectly maps onto Awaad's categorization.
Hmm.
He states unequivocally that these sprawling nights have lost absolutely all their meaning. They don't even manage to trigger a spark of nostalgia.
Which is kind of sad.
It is. But the mechanics behind why these memories fade entirely comes back to the foundation they were built on.
Right, because when the core of your youth is constructed around fleeting pursuits.
Like chasing the end of the bottle, the end of the night, and romantic obsessions that you allow to drain your mental fortresses.
Exactly. Time inevitably exposes the hollowness of the architecture.
They weren't building anything durable, they were just consuming time.
It's chilling, really, to realize that a night that felt so profound, so vital to your identity at 22, can be reduced to an event that simply happened and passed,
Yeah.
leaving nothing behind. But, running away into those faded nights requires accomplices. You share that hollow architecture with other people.
And the people who inhabit those blank Polaroids carry their own distinct emotional residue. Awaad introduces a dear friend from that era, Ahmed El-Muwalim, to illustrate a pain that is entirely locked in the past tense.
Now, the surface of this friendship sounds incredibly rich.
It does.
Awaad details staying up late, swapping scandalous stories, and exchanging books of poetry. They would sit together, laughing from the bottom of their hearts at the miserable faces of commuters heading into work while they were just, retreating to sleep.
A quintessential bohemian lifestyle.
Exactly. He describes a very specific, heavy calm that would settle over them as they listened to the iconic voice of Kulthum, affectionately known as El-Set, just after smoking the first 2 stains of shisha.
The cultural weight of Kulthum in that setting is immense.
We can imagine.
Her music demands absolute emotional surrender. It is the soundtrack of deep existential longing and heartbreak.
Wow.
So they're physically arranging themselves in an atmosphere that practically mandates profound vulnerability.
Which creates a massive dissonance. Well, because if they are soaking in the ultimate music of the soul, sharing secrets and poetry, the foundation for a deeply rooted ride-or-die friendship is right there.
Right, it seems perfectly set up.
But then Awaad identifies this relationship as a source of pain. The only logical explanation is that the depth stopped entirely at the aesthetic level.
And that is precisely the tragic flaw Awaad reveals.
Yeah.
Despite the shared atmosphere and all those late hours, the moment the conversation brushed against what Awaad calls dangerous areas.
Meaning the genuinely deep, vulnerable matters of the heart.
Exactly. Whenever they hit those areas, Ahmed El-Muwalim would instantly deflect and change the subject.
Oh, that's frustrating. He was allowed access to the sun, the rebellion, and the atmospheric mood, but the door was slammed shut the moment he asked for true emotional depth.
Yeah. Awaad realized he was a companion for the night, but never earned the trust to be a confidant for the soul.
That kind of boundary, realizing you aren't deemed worthy of someone's genuine interior life despite spending all your time with them, is a very sharp, specific rejection.
It hurt immensely at the time because the currency of youth is so often the approval and intimacy of our peers.
Right.
But the crucial pivot Awaad makes is evaluating that pain from his vantage point today. Time has completely neutralized the sting.
Really? It doesn't hurt at all anymore.
No, he admits with brutal clarity that today, earning Ahmed El-Muwalim's trust is the absolute last thing in the universe he cares about.
Wow. The pain was real, but it just lacked the structural integrity to survive the decades.
Exactly. You outgrow the people whose approval you once starved for.
And the lack of depth that originally caused the hurt becomes the exact reason you no longer care.
Spot on.
So, okay, if the wild nights have faded to white and the agonizing superficial friendships have lost all their weight, we were left looking for what actually endures.
The things that still press on the soul.
Right. What survives the passage of time to still press heavily on his soul today?
We arrive at the core of the artist. It isn't a past romance, and it isn't the ghost of a faded friendship. It is the enduring legacy of his generation's art and the attempt to forge meaning out of the wreckage. Awaad draws a stark dividing line here between the 70s generation of poets and his own 90s cohort.
Right. The 70s poets, according to Awad, they believed they were taking the ultimate literary adventure by exploring every single traditional classical purpose of poetry.
Right.
They wrote about wine, satire, pride, flirtation, and praise. They operated securely within an established rule book, merely pushing against the edges of forms that had existed for centuries.
Then the 90s generation arrives, looks at those classical forms, and just throws them entirely in the trash.
Just toss them.
Yeah, the traditional themes felt like a lie to them, a vocabulary completely inadequate for their reality. Instead, Awad's generation declared new, eternal purposes for their poetry.
What were they?
They dedicated their art to three specific pillars: pain, absurdity, and silence.
I mean, willingly strapping the burden of pain, absurdity, and silence to your collective backs is a monumental artistic gamble.
It is a heavy load to bear.
Definitely. They actively chose to stop writing, to praise or flirt, and decided to only transmit signals from the center of the void.
Yeah.
The natural assumption is that by sacrificing the traditional playbook to explore such raw, unvarnished truth, they would eventually find some form of peace, or at least recognition. You'd hope they managed to write themselves out of the shadows.
But the reality Awaad presents is deeply sobering.
Oh.
Yeah, they took the gamble, they changed the purposes of poetry, and society's response was basically to accuse them of superficiality and stupidity.
That is brutal.
Right. No matter how moving or profound their verses are, the world still dismisses their work as nonsense.
To pour your entire generational consciousness into a new artistic movement only to be met with a blank stare from society is devastating.
It truly is.
It's an intellectual war where the front line hasn't moved an inch in decades.
And that stagnant front line is why it remains the only category that still hurts.
Yeah.
Awad writes that they are still there today, remaining in the shadows. They are still actively trying to extract poetry from the centers of feeling pain. They're still experimenting with removing the female from the center of their existence, trying to transcend the youthful obsession that once occupied their mental fortresses to find a higher artistic purpose.
And the result?
The lingering tragedy is that despite all the years, all the intellectual rebellion, and the fading of their wild youth,
They are just exhausted, and most things are still painful.
man,
We've traced a really remarkable arc through Bahaa Awaad's memory architecture today.
we really have.
We started with the loud, unrecorded, and ultimately unregretted rebellion of a 90s generation mocking a world they secretly loved.
Right.
We watched the illusion of invincibility shatter in a dim restaurant, ushering in the painful dawn of helplessness. We saw how the frantic nights spent trying to outrun that helplessness faded into meaningless blank Polaroids, and how the superficial friendships of that era lost their power to wound.
It's quite the journey.
And finally, we settle on the one ache that time refuses to edit away. The exhausting, ongoing struggle of the artist trying to translate the absurdity of life to a world that refuses to listen.
It forces a profound reevaluation of how we archive our own lives.
It really does.
We assume the emotional weight of a moment is fixed the second it happens, but time constantly reassigns value. What feels crushingly heavy today might blow away entirely, while a seemingly quiet failure might lay the foundation for a lifetime of reflection.
Which opens up a fascinating, slightly terrifying question for all of us right now.
Okay, what is it?
Well, we live in an era of obsessive digital archiving.
Oh, sure.
We save every text, we back up every photo to the cloud, we log every mundane Tuesday.
My dude.
If the human brain relies on time's natural editorial mercy to let those hollow, exhausting memories organically fade into blank Polaroids.
What happens when our technology refuses to let anything fade?
Exactly. Are we robbing ourselves of the necessary ability to let the meaningless parts of our youth disappear?
That is a chilling thought.
Right. Take a look at the things causing you intense stress or pride today. If you were to write your own version of things that press on the soul 20 years from now, you have to wonder if the cloud will even allow your trivial moments to lose their meaning.
Or if you'll be forced to carry the weight of everything forever.
Exactly. Something to think about. Keep diving deep.